The origins of popular music terms, a cultural and historical examination of indie, grunge, and other genre labels. Popular music is more than entertainment. It is a reflection of sociocultural identity, rebellion, innovation, and community. Terms like indie, grunge, punk, and hip-hop have evolved beyond simple genre designations. They embody ideologies, aesthetics, and movements. This article explores the origins of selected popular music terms, tracing their etymologies, historical contexts, and transformations over time. By understanding the roots of these terms, we gain deeper insight into the cultural forces that shaped modern music. 1. Introduction. Music has always been a powerful medium of expression, but in the 20th and 21st centuries, the terminologies used to categorize music have taken on a cultural significance beyond mere classification. The words indie, grunge, punk, and others carry layers of meaning that encompass fashion, politics, technology, and identity. This paper investigates how several influential music terms came into existence, what they originally signified, and how they evolved into mainstream use. 2. The origin of indie. Indie is an abbreviation of independent and originally referred to music produced outside the influence and funding of the major record labels. In the early stages, it was a term of logistical distinction rather than stylistic categorization. Over time, however, indie evolved into an aesthetic and cultural identity, embodying values like artistic freedom, anti-commercialism, and a do-it-yourself (DIY) ethic. 2.1 Early usage. Independence as necessity. In the late 1970s and early 1980s, the music industry was dominated by major record labels such as Warner, EMI, Sony, and Universal that controlled access to mass distribution, radio play, and promotional channels. In contrast, indie labels emerged as small, often locally based operations run by music enthusiasts rather than corporate executives. These labels provided a platform for bands whose sound, image, or message did not align with mainstream tastes. In the UK, Rough Trade Records, established in 1978, became a cornerstone of the indie movement, signing bands such as The Smiths and Scritti Politti. Similarly, in the US, SST Records, Discord Records, and Twin/Tone Records supported punk and alternative acts like Black Flag, Minor Threat, and The Replacements. These labels emphasized rawness, authenticity, and political expression over commercial polish. 2.2 Rise of the indie sound and ethos. By the mid-1980s, indie began to signify not only the business model of the label but also a distinctive sound and worldview. Indie artists often embraced a lo-fi aesthetics with unpolished recording quality that emphasized sincerity over slickness. Personal or introspective lyrics, in contrast to the grandiosity of pop or arena rock. Minimal or unconventional marketing, often relying on college radio, fanzines, and word of mouth. The development of the UK indie chart in 1980 by Record Mirror further legitimized indie as a music category. The chart ranked releases from independent labels and helped foster a distinct community of listeners and artists who sought alternatives to the commercial mainstream. 2.3 Evolution into the 1990s and 2000s. In the 1990s, the definition of indie became increasingly complex. Many indie bands began to achieve mainstream success. R.E.M., Pixies, Radiohead, and the Smashing Pumpkins were examples of groups that originated in the independent scene but signed with major labels. Despite this shift, they retained the indie label due to their creative approaches, artistic integrity, or resistance to mainstream trends. Ironically, indie became both a marketing term and a cultural signifier. Major labels began creating subsidiaries that mimicked indie labels in branding and promotion, a practice known as faux indie. This blurring of lines led to debates about authenticity and what it truly meant to be indie. In the 2000s, the internet revolutionized distribution and promotion, enabling a new wave of independent artists to bypass both major and indie labels. Platforms like Bandcamp, SoundCloud, and MySpace allowed musicians to self-publish, further democratizing access and redefining independence. 2.4 Indie as lifestyle and aesthetic. Beyond music, Indie also evolved into a broader cultural aesthetic. The term came to be associated with a vintage or retro fashion, DIY ethics in art, film, and publishing, a preference for minimalism and authenticity, an aversion to mainstream trends and consumer culture. This shift turned indie into a form of cultural capital, something that could be performed or signaled through taste, attitude, and media choices. As a result, indie became as much about identity as it was about music. 3. The emergence of grunge. Grunge is one of the most iconic music terms to emerge from the late 20th century, symbolizing both a distinct musical style and a broader cultural mood of disillusionment, alienation, and anti-mainstream resistance. Although often associated with a specific geographic origin, Seattle, Washington, the term grunge has come to represent an entire era of music, fashion, and youth identity that redefined rock in the early 1990s. 3.1 Linguistic origins and early usage. The term grunge is derived from the word grungy, meaning dirty, grimy, or unkempt. It was colloquially used in American English as early as the 1960s to describe filth or mess. In a musical context, however, it first appeared in the late 1980s as a tongue-in-cheek descriptor used by independent record labels, particularly Sub Pop Records, based in Seattle, to market the raw, distorted sound of the local underground rock scene. The now legendary Sub Pop co-founder Jonathan Poneman, along with publicist Megan Jasper, helped popularize the term grunge in press materials, often exaggerating or inventing the grunge lexicon to mystify the scene and build intrigue. Though initially meant half-seriously, the term stuck, and grunge quickly became the shorthand for this new wave of gritty, emotionally intense music. 3.2 Musical characteristics of grunge. Grunge blended elements of punk rock, heavy metal, and alternative rock. Its musical traits include heavily distorted guitar riffs, often played with fuzz or overdrive, slow to mid-tempo rhythms with sudden dynamic shifts, dark, introspective, or nihilistic lyrics, unpolished production that rejected the sleekness of 1980s mainstream rock, vocal styles that ranged from mumbling melancholy to aggressive shouting. This sonic fusion resulted in a sound that was both emotionally raw and musically powerful, capturing the angst and disaffection of Generation X. Key early grunge bands include Mudhoney, Soundgarden, A Green River, Melvins, Alice in Chains, Tad. 3.3 Seattle, the epicenter of grunge. Seattle's geographical isolation from major music industry hubs like Los Angeles and New York helped foster a tight-knit, collaborative underground scene. Bands often shared rehearsal spaces, performed together at small venues like the Crocodile and OK Hotel, and released music through independent labels such as Sub Pop. This localism bred a sense of authenticity. Seattle grunge was not initially designed for mass consumption. Instead, it was a form of regional expression, gritty, cold, emotionally honest, and intentionally detached from the glamorous and overproduced aesthetics of 1980s rock. 3.4 Grunge goes mainstream, Nirvana and the 1991 breakthrough. The commercial explosion of grunge came with the release of Nirvana's album Nevermind in 1991, featuring the anthemic single, Smells Like Teen Spirit. The album unexpectedly knocked Michael Jackson's Dangerous from the top of the Billboard 200, signaling a major cultural shift. The success of Nirvana, along with Pearl Jam's 10, 1991, Soundgarden's Bad Motorfinger, 1991, and Alice in Chains' Dirt, 1992, pushed grunge into the mainstream. Record labels, media outlets, and fashion brands quickly co-opted the term. Grunge fashion, characterized by flannel shirts, ripped jeans, combat boots, and thrift store finds, was suddenly on fashion runways and in malls across America. 3.5 The irony and decline of grunge. As grunge entered mainstream consciousness, many of its original artists and fans felt disillusioned by the sudden commodification of what was meant to be anti-commercial. Bands who had defined themselves by their resistance to corporate rock were now signed to major labels, featured on MTV, and sold millions of albums. Kurt Cobain, frontman of Nirvana and the reluctant poster child of grunge, famously struggled with the fame and pressure associated with the genre's popularity. His death in 1994 is widely considered a symbolic endpoint of the grunge era. After the mid-1990s, grunge gave way to post-grunge and alternative rock bands that adopted its musical elements but often lacked its emotional intensity or social critique. The music industry moved on to other genres like nu metal, pop-punk, and emo, but the legacy of grunge remained embedded in rock history. 3.6 Cultural Legacy of Grunge. Today, grunge is remembered not just as a music genre but as a cultural moment, a response to the superficiality of 1980s consumerism, the alienation of suburban youth, and the search for emotional authenticity in art. It also marked one of the last moments when a grassroots scene could unexpectedly become a global phenomenon. Grunge influenced everything from fashion to film, e.g., Singles by Cameron Crowe, and its ethos of authenticity and disaffection continues to inspire musicians, artists, and fans. Bands like Foo Fighters, founded by Nirvana's drummer Dave Grohl, and newer acts like Bully or King Woman carry forward the sound and spirit of grunge, albeit in updated forms. 4. Other influential terms. While indie and grunge are among the most iconic genre labels in modern music history, many other terms have also taken on complex meanings that extend beyond sonic characteristics. Terms like punk, hip-hop, and EDM have shaped global music cultures, subcultures, fashion trends, political ideologies, and even language. This section explores several of these influential terms, how they originated, evolved, and contributed to wider cultural narratives. 4.1 Punk. The sound of rebellion. Etymology and origins. The word punk originally carried derogatory meanings, including a young troublemaker, petty criminal, or in prison slang, a submissive partner. In the 1970s, this negative connotation was reappropriated by a new generation of musicians and fans seeking to challenge the status quo in both music and society. Musical roots. Emerging simultaneously in New York and London, punk rock was a reaction against the bloated excesses of progressive rock and the corporate commercialization of popular music. Early punk bands such as the Ramones, the Sex Pistols, and the Clash played fast, raw, stripped-down music that favored simplicity and energy over technical proficiency. Philosophy and aesthetics. Punk quickly became a subcultural movement marked by DIY ethics, self-produced albums, zines, shows, anti-authoritarian attitudes, a provocative fashion, mohawks, leather jackets, safety pins, emphasis on youth identity, alienation, and anti-commercialism. Legacy. Punk's legacy is far-reaching. It influenced genres like hardcore, post-punk, emo, and alternative rock, and it introduced a model of self-sufficient cultural production that would later inform indie and underground scenes. 4.2 Hip-hop. From the Bronx to the World. Linguistic origins. The term hip-hop was reportedly coined by Keith Cowboy Wiggins of Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five, originally as playful rhythmic banter mimicking the sound of marching soldiers. Later, it was used by cultural pioneer Afrika Bambaataa to refer to a holistic movement encompassing multiple artistic elements. 4 core elements of hip-hop culture. 1. MCing, rapping, vocal delivery of rhythm and rhyme. 2. DJing, manipulation of turntables to create beats and loops. 3. B-boying/b-girling, breakdancing, athletic, expressive street dance. 4. Graffiti art, visual art using public spaces as canvases.
Social context.
Hip-hop emerged in the South Bronx in the 1970s, born out of poverty, racial tension, and urban neglect. It gave voice to marginalized youth, primarily African American and Latino communities, and provided a platform for storytelling, resistance, and creativity. Commercialization and global reach. By the late 1980s and 1990s, artists like Run DMC, Public Enemy, Tupac Shakur, and the Notorious B.I.G. transformed hip-hop into a global commercial force. Today, hip-hop influences everything from fashion and language to politics and advertising, making it arguably the most culturally dominant genre of the 21st century. 4.3 EDM. The rise of digital dance culture. Definition and acronym. EDM stands for electronic dance music and became a popular umbrella term in the early 2000s to describe a wide range of percussive electronic genres, including house, techno, trance, dubstep, and drum and bass. Origins and evolution. Electronic music dates back to the 1970s with pioneers like Kraftwerk, Giorgio Moroder, and Brian Eno. However, the culture of electronic dance music took off in underground club scenes in cities like Chicago, house, Detroit, techno, and Berlin, minimal/industrial techno. Mainstream adoption. EDM, as a term, gained prominence when large-scale festivals such as Tomorrowland, Ultra Music Festival, and Electric Daisy Carnival emerged in the 2000s and 2010s. Artists like David Guetta, Calvin Harris, deadmau5, and Skrillex brought electronic music to stadiums and pop radio. Criticism of the term EDM. Many underground electronic artists reject the label EDM because it's seen as a commercial invention used by the American music industry to homogenize diverse genres. For purists, EDM flattens the complexity and cultural roots of each subgenre. 4.4 additional terms of note.
Lo-fi.
Short for low fidelity. This term refers to music with intentionally unpolished sound, often associated with indie or bedroom recording aesthetics. It emphasizes mood, warmth, and imperfection. Artists like Mac DeMarco and Clairo popularized the style in the 2010s. Shoegaze. A subgenre of alternative rock characterized by heavy use of effects pedals, ethereal vocals, and layered guitar textures. The name comes from performers' tendency to look down at their pedals while playing. Originated with UK bands like My Bloody Valentine and Slowdive in the late 1980s. Emo. Originally an abbreviation of emotional hardcore, this genre started as a sub-style of punk with confessional lyrics and intense performances. By the 2000s, emo became a youth subculture with distinct fashion and mainstream success via bands like My Chemical Romance and Dashboard Confessional. 4.5 The fluidity and power of genre labels. What these terms share is their ability to evolve, from niche subcultural tags to mainstream markers of style and identity. Each term also reflects a broader societal undercurrent. A punk challenged political institutions and musical formalism. Hip-hop articulated urban struggle and resilience. A grunge expressed generational angst and disaffection. EDM celebrated escapism and collective euphoria. These terms are more than marketing categories, they are cultural signifiers that help define the spirit of their times. Their continued reinterpretation demonstrates the dynamic relationship between language, music, and identity. Specific platform like a lecture handout, educational video script, or digital article layout. The terminology of popular music is a dynamic interplay of language, culture, and commerce. Terms like indie and grunge began as expressions of resistance and artistic identity, but evolved into global marketing categories. Understanding the roots and transformations of these labels helps us appreciate not only the music, but the broader cultural narratives they represent.